Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Islam Decoded channel. The US and Israel deployed their forces in launching attacks on Iran, killing its supreme leader and key military figures, marking the start of an ongoing and intense conflict. Since then, Iran has responded with waves of missiles and drone strike against Israel and major US military bases in Qatar, UAE, and Kingdom of Saudi. It has also closed the Strait of Hormuz, a vital waterway that carries a significant portion of the world's oil, almost 20 to 25% of the global oil production and essential goods, and threatening both regional and global supply chains. Information about global events, especially in regions like Middle East, is often shaped by different perspectives, interests, and narratives because the mainstream media always manipulate and corrupt the information and spread wrong news which confuses people. So in this discussion, the goal is not to take sides but to step back and examine the situation from a broader and more analytical perspective. So we'll focus on historical context, strategic interest, and geopolitical dynamics, so you can better understand how and why those tensions exist. By looking at multiple angles and connecting the bigger pictures, we aim to move beyond headlines and explore the deeper focus and forces shaping this conflict. What would happen if tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran erupted into full scale war? Imagine a scenario where coordinated strikes eliminate top Iranian leadership, where missiles rain down across the Middle East, and where the Strait of Hormuz, the main global oil gateway, suddenly shuts down. This isn't just another regional conflict, it's a crisis. It's a crisis that could reshape global politics, disrupt economies, and potentially draw the world into a much larger war. So the key questions are: why would such a war begin? What are the real motivations behind it? And the most importantly, where could it lead? In this discussion, we'll break down the history, the strategic interests, and the relationships and the possible outcomes, connecting the dots to understand the story behind the headlines. Let's look at the historical background of each of the nations that are involved in the war. Let's look at the history of the United States. The United States emerged as an independent nation in 1776 and developed into a global power over the next 2 centuries. After internal struggles like the Civil War, it expanded economically and militarily. In the 20th century, its decisive rules in both world wars and the Cold War established it as a dominant global force. Since the Cold War, the US has remained deeply involved in global politics, especially in the Middle East. Why? Because the region holds a massive share of world's oil reserves. Maintaining energy stability and global economic balances has been the central to US strategy. But to fully understand US global power, we must also look at its financial system. After World War II, the global economy operated under the Bretton Woods system, where the US dollar was backed by gold and other currencies were tied to the dollar. However, in 1971, the United States ended the gold convertibility of the dollar, effectively removing the gold standard. This meant that the dollar became the reserve currency, no longer backed by a physical commodity, something that is tangible. At this point, a critical question emerged: what would give the US dollar its global value? The answer became oil. In the 1970s, the US developed strategic agreements with major oil producing countries in the Middle East, especially Saudi and the Gulf states. Under those agreements, oil would be sold globally in US dollars. Oil producing countries would reinvest surplus revenues into the US economy. That's why you see the recent news is that when Trump visited those Gulf states, some of them have promised to invest up to $1 trillion, which is the reflection of those agreements. This system became known as a petrodollar system. As a result, global demand for oil created constant demand for US dollars. The dollars became the world's primary reserve currency. The US gained enormous financial influence over the global economy. This is why the Middle East is not just a geopolitically important but financially critical to US global power. To protect those interests, the US has maintained military presence and security partnership in the region, particularly after events such as the Gulf War in 1990 to 1991, when it led a coalition to ensure stability in global oil markets. At the same time, the US has developed a close strategic partnership with Israel, viewing it as a key ally for intelligence, military coordination, and regional influence. Let's look at the history of Israel. The modern state of Israel emerged through a long and highly complex historical process shaped by empirical decisions, migration, nationalism, and conflict. A key turning point came during the World War I, when the region of Palestine was under British control following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire Khilafah. In 1970, in 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, a public statement expressing support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. So they unjustly have given the authority to occupy the land of the Palestinian to be occupied by Jewish people from the Europe, which is pretty sad to hear. At the time, Palestine was already inhabited predominantly by an Arab Palestinian population, while with existing social, political, and cultural structures, because it's right after the World War One, everything is still stabilizing. Following the Balfour Declaration and the establishment of the British mandate over Palestine, between 1920 and 1940, a large group of Jewish immigrants migrated to the region and increased its population significantly, driven by Zionist movement and later by the rise of anti-Semitism and other so-called incident that people tell. So over time, this period saw growing tensions between Jewish communities and the people that are living in the region, and it's very simple, right? If you are being invaded, you have to resist, and because of the resistance, finally, by the help of the West, the Palestinians were expelled from their land, and the number was to hundreds. Some numbers estimated to be 500 to 700,000 of Palestinians were expelled from Palestine during 1940s to 1947, and then there was a regional war, the conflict. In response to that, the United Nations proposed a partition plan in 1947, recommending the division of the land into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international administration. The Jewish leadership accepted the plan, but many, Muslims did not accept it. It's very simple, right? Because their land were taken, and they would never be. They will not accept those proposals because it's their land. So they rejected the plan. Following the UN decision, civil conflict broke out between the communities. In 1948, the state of Israel declared independence. This immediately led to a broader regional war involving neighboring Arab states. During and after this conflict, known by Israelis as the War of Independence and the Palestinians as Naqab, it's a catastrophe, right? Because they were expelled, their homes were taken, and they were expelled from their home. A large number of Palestinians were displaced and became refugees. As it could be more than a million by that time. The outcome of the 1948 war established the state of Israel, but it also left behind a deeply unresolved issue regarding Palestinian statehood, borders, and the status of refugees, issues that remain central to the conflict today. In the following decades, further wars, especially the 1967 Six Days War, resulted in Israel gaining control over additional territories, including the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, further intensifying regional tension. Since then, the conflict remained open, and the recent narratives have been out in the public that the many groups within the Jewish state are thinking to establish the greater Israel, which they claim to be promised by God in Bible, and they want to establish that, which, and the ultimate goal is to establish the greater Israel, which includes Lebanon, Jordan, parts of Iraq, Saudi, and Egypt. That's why until today, Israel's borders are not consolidated; rather, it's expanding. Let's look at Iran's history. Iran's history begins with the ancient Persian Empire, one of the world's earliest and most powerful civilizations, known for its governance, culture, and imperial structures. In the 7th century, Persia was conquered during the Islamic expansion, becoming part of the wider Islamic world. Over time, Persian culture blended with Islamic civilization while maintaining its distinct identity. For centuries, the region remained largely Sunni Muslims because those lands were incorporated into Islamic Khilafah, aligned with the broader Islamic empires. A major shift occurred in the 16th century under the Safavid dynasty, when the 12 Shias Islam was established as the state religion. Over time, Iran transitioned into a Shia majority society, creating a long-lasting divide with the neighboring Sunni empires. In the 20th century, Iran was ruled by the Pahlavi monarch, which pursued modernizations and close ties with Western powers, especially the United States. However, in 1953, Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh nationalized the oil industries, and he took the oil from some of the Western powers too, and they nationalized, which was distributed proportionally. And in response, the United States and British supported a operation that led to his overthrow and strengthened its Shia rules. And that shows the hypocrisy, right? In the name of democracy, they have annihilated many nations, and they took all the resources, and now they replaced a democratically elected prime minister with a monarch, and it's a nonsense, right? So they're exposed. People from the east and west know that this bogus dialogue of democracy is nonsense, nothing but nonsense. Theoretically, democracy don't work, and it's practically doesn't work as well. So it's a slogan to take resource from the weak nations, and that's basically what have been happening for last 100 or 200 centuries. When you see any natural resources are found anywhere in the world in the name of democracy and other stupid names, the imperial force go there and they take the resources and they put the puppets into the leadership. This event deeply shaped Iranian perceptions of foreign influence. Iran's oil industry itself became central to global geopolitics. Originally controlled by British interest under the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, Iran's oil wealth was later later tied to Western economic and strategic interest. And think about that. That's fascinating, right? Iran's oil were imported. Exported to British, so British owned 40% of the oil, Iran's oil. Oil made Iran a key player in global energy markets and a critical ally during the Cold War. However, growing domestic opposition to authoritarian rule and foreign influence led to the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which overthrew the monarch and established the Islamic Republic of Iran. This transformation what happened and Iran, this transformed Iran into a Shia Islamic state with a revolutionary political ideology and an independent foreign policy stance. Today, Iran's global position is shaped by three layers. It's ancient, ancient, it's ancient, 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 it ancient, ancient. Its historical imperial legacy, its Shia Islamic transformation under the Safavids, its modern revolutionary state structure, and its strategic oil reserve tied to global energy security. And let's look at the relationships between those powers because it's very imperative for us to understand how those countries play role dividing power among themselves. Let's first look at the US and Israel relationship. The United States and Israel share one of the closest and most comprehensive alliances in modern geopolitics. The US is Israel's strongest global supporter, providing extensive backing across multiple dimensions, including economic aid, political support, military assistance, intelligence cooperation, and diplomatic protection on the international stage. This broad support has played a key role in the strengthening Israel's position as a major regional power in the Middle East. From a strategic perspective, the Israel state is often viewed within US foreign policy as an important pillar for maintaining influence in the Middle East. The region itself holds critical importance due to its energy resources, trade routes, and geopolitical positioning. In this context, Israel is seen as a key ally that helps the US maintaining its broader strategic presence and safeguards its economic and political interest in the region. At the same time, this relationship is not based on identical long-term goals. Israel has its own independent strategic vision, shaped largely by its historical experience of conflict and security concerns. One perspective within Israeli strategic thought emphasizes ensuring long-term survival and security in a hostile regional environment. This has in some interpretations been associated with territorial expansion and maintaining strategic depth, often discussed in political discourse in relation to broader historical and ideological visions, sometimes referred to as Greater Israel. From the US side, however, the objective is not for Israel to become the sole dominant power in the region. Instead, US strategy is generally based on maintaining a balance of power, where no single regional actor becomes strong enough to operate independently of US influence. In this framework, Israel is a powerful ally, but still one part of the wider regional structure. This also where Iran becomes relevant in broader strategic calculations, as it is often viewed as a counterbalancing force in regional geopolitics. Thus, those overlapping dynamics contribute to the complexity of US policy in the Middle East, where alliance and rivalries often intersect in direct and strategic ways. Let's look at the US-Iran relationship. US-Iran relationship, the relationship between the United States and Iran is highly complex and often appears contradictory on the surface. Publicly, it is defined by hostility, sanctions, and geopolitical rivalry. However, when examined more closely, it is also includes moments of indirect cooperation, overlapping interests, and strategic calculations. At this core, both countries pursue influence in the Middle East, but with very different long term objectives. The United States seeks global dominance, regional stability, and control over strategic energy routes. Iran seeks regional influence, political independence, and resistance to foreign interference. Historically, this relationship has shifted significantly over time. During the rule of Shah, Iran was one of the closest allies of the United States in the region. However, a major turning point came in 1953 when Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was overthrown with support from US and British intelligence after he nationalized Iran's oil industry. This event deeply shaped Iranian distrust toward the United States. After the 1979 Iranian Revolution, Iran adopted a strong anti-US stance, which became part of its political and ideological identity. This opposition also helped the new regime maintain internal unity and legitimacy. However, externally, United States and Iran work together. Rather, Iran is one of the closest ally of United States, supporting other war. If we look at the war in Iraq, Afghanistan, and war conflict in Syria, despite open hostility, there have been moments where US and Iranian interests indirectly overlapped, especially in major regional conflicts. During Afghanistan war, after the September 11 attack, Iran cooperated with the United States against the Afghan, Taliban. Iranian officials played a key role in helping establish the post-Taliban government and supporting the formation of new political structure in Afghanistan. They aided, military and every single way to allow United States to enter into Afghanistan. And during the same, during Iraq war, Iran helped US to fight the war against Saddam. Syrian conflict in Syria, Iran supported the government military while the US opposed it. However, in a broader sense, both sides were involved in complex, multi-layered conflict where different groups, including many Sunni militant factions, were targeted by various actors. The situation reflects overlapping, but this situation shows that how Iran helped United States to overthrow and stabilize itself in the region. Strategic reality. Those examples highlight a key point. Even though the US and Iran are adversaries, on surface they're adversaries, but externally, when it comes to external threats, mainly the Sunni forces, Iran helps United States to maintain its influence in the region. Let's look at the regional balance of power. A core principle of US foreign policy is to ensure that no single country dominates a strategically important region like the Middle East. By maintaining a balance between competing powers, the US can prevent the emergence of a unified regional force that could challenge its influence. This often involves supporting different allies at different times, managing rivalry, different times, managing wars and ensuring that regional actors remain dependent directly or indirectly on US political, military, or economical support. If we look at the South Asia region, Southeast Asia region. If you look at the India and Pakistan, it's counterbalancing power. When India obtained nuclear weapon, Pakistan were able to quickly. In fact, Pakistan was the only country who was able to obtain military weapons so quickly by the help of United States. Because if India has the nuclear power and only power in the region, they can unite the region, and they have absolute influence over the region, which does not go with the regional policy of United States. Therefore, they allowed Pakistan to obtain nuclear weapon. Now the region is stabilized. Global dominance. It's very important to understand, especially China and Russia. While regional powers matter, the United States ultimately views global competitors, particularly China and Russia, as its primary strategic challengers. The Middle East plays a role in this large competition. Control over energy routes affects global economy. Influence in the region can limit the expansion of rival powers. Military presence ensure rapid response capability across continents. From this perspective, the region is not just important on its own, but as part of a larger global power structure. Protection of the dollar system and global energy flows. One of the most critical yet often less discussed objective is maintaining the stability of the global financial system centered around the US dollar. Because oil is traded globally in dollars, stability in energy supply chains is directly linked to the strength of the dollar itself. This means securing major oil routes like the Strait of Hormuz, maintaining relationships with oil producing nations, preventing disruptions that could destabilize global markets. In this sense, US strategy is not only geopolitical but also deeply economic and financial. Israel's strategy. Israel's strategy is shaped by its geography, history, and security concern as a relatively small state in a complex and often hostile regional environment. Self-sufficiency and security. Israel prioritizes survival above all else. Given its size and location, it can't rely solely on geography for defense. Instead, it focuses on military superiority, advanced intelligence capabilities, strong alliances, especially with the United States. The goal is to ensure that any potential threat is deterred potential threat is deterred before it becomes existential. Regional fragmentation to reduce the threats. Another key strategic concept often discussed in geopolitical analysis is the idea of preventing unified position in the region. A fragmented or divided regional landscape reduces the likelihood of coordinated threats from multiple states or groups. In this context, internal division among neighboring states can limit large-scale opposition. Regional instability, while risky, can also reduce the formation of unified coalitions. Supporters and critics interrupt this dynamic differently, but it remains an important part of how analysts understand Israel's long-term strategic environment. Iran's strategy. Iran's strategy is more regionally focused, shaped by its history of foreign intervention, revolution, and desire for independence. First, let's look at regional power status. Iran seeks to establish itself as a dominant regional power in the Middle East. This includes expanding politically and military influence, building alliances and partnership across the region, projecting power beyond its border when necessary. Its goal is not necessarily global dominance, but rather it ensures that it remains a key discussion-making force in regional affairs. internal stability without foreign interference. A central pillar of Iran's strategy is protecting its internal political system from external influence. This is deeply rooted in historical experience, particularly the 1953 COP, foreign involvement in its domestic politics. As a result, Iran emphasizes political independency, resistance to external pressure, maintaining regime stability. This often shapes its defensive and sometimes confrontational approach toward global power, especially the Gulf states. When we look at those strategies together, a pattern begins to emerge. Each country is not acting randomly, but according to long term strategic goals shaped by history, geography, and power dynamics. And it is the interaction of those strategies, sometimes align, sometimes don't align, that drives the tensions we see today. Now imagine tensions reaching a breaking point. Israel claims Iran is nearing nuclear weapons capability. Diplomatic efforts collapse. A coordinated strike targets Iranian leadership and infrastructure. Iran responds with missile and drone attacks across the region. Then comes the most critical move, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This single action could disrupt a massive portion of global oil supply, directly threatening the petrodollar system and global economic stability. The result, oil price surge, global trade is disrupted, economic shock waves spread worldwide. What happens next? At this stage, the conflict reaches a critical turning point. What happens next depends on how each actor calculates risks, cost, and long term survival. There are four major paths this conflict could take. Negotiated de escalation, best case scenario. In this scenario, Iran leverages its strongest strategic weapon, not missiles, but economic disruption. By restricting or threatening the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, creates immediate pressure on global energy markets, Western economics, US political leadership. While prices could surge dramatically, which we are seeing now, it surged crazy, targeting inflation, stock market instability, and domestic pressure inside the United States and allied countries. Facing this, the US may push for urgent negotiations. That's why we are seeing the negotiations are taking place between Iran and US, and Pakistan is the is the third party who is allowing those conversations to take place. Not necessarily out of weaknesses, but to stabilize global markets and protect the dollar system. However, this is where tensions emerge. The US may seek a balanced agreement, restoring regional stability. Israel may resist any agreement that allows Iran to retain military or nuclear capability. If the economic pressure becomes severe enough, especially if Israeli infrastructure or economic surface sustain damage, Israel may be forced to accept a ceasefire framework. The result, a fragile, highly complex agreement where Iran retains some regional influence, Israel strengthens its defensive posture, the US reasserts its role as a stabilizing power. But importantly, this would not end the conflict permanently, it would simply pause it. Prolonged regional war. If negotiations fail, the conflict shifts into a long-term war. In this scenario, the US increases military involvement. Israel intensifies its strike on Iranian infrastructures. Iran expands its response across the region. Iran's advantage becomes critical here. Geographically, mountains terrain makes invasion difficult. Population and manpower are immense. network of regional allies and proxy groups could come into play, and they could inflict major blows against U.S. and Iran, Israel. Instead of direct confrontation alone, Iran could engage in a asymmetric warfare, targeting U.S. base across the Middle East, which we are seeing now, shaping lanes, allied governments. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Israel would rely on advanced air power, intelligence system, precision strikes. But this war become extremely costly. While markets remain unstable, global trade slows, military spending surges. For the US, the biggest risk is not military defeat, but economic strain, especially if prolonged instability threatens confidence in the dollar. For Israel, sustained conflict could weaken its economy and internal instability. For Iran, the cost is also severe. Its already fragile economy could completely collapse. This scenario creates a pretty um, catastrophic scenario where no side wins, but all sides suffer. But I think Iran will suffer the most. The third scenario, global escalation, worst case scenario. I think it's highly unlikely that will happen. This is the most dangerous path. In this conflict, if the conflict expands beyond the region, major global powers may become involved. But again, it's very highly unlikely that the major power like China or Russia will ever be involved, unless because for a few cases, China depends heavily on Middle Eastern energy supplies, and Russia has strategic interest in weakening Western influence. If global energy flows are severely disrupted, China could be forced to act economically, politically, or even militarily. But as I said, it's highly unlikely. Russia, on the other hand, may benefit initially from higher oil price, but prolonged instability could draw it deeper into the conflict. At this stage, several risks emerge: expansion of war beyond the Middle East, direct confrontation between global powers, escalation toward nuclear deterrence, or even limited nuclear use, which, as I said, it's pretty low chance, but could happen under those circumstances. However, it's important to note this scenario remains unlikely because all major powers understand the catastrophic consequence of full-scale global war. Still, even a small miscalculation could trigger a chain reaction. And for the regime change scenario. In this scenario, sustained military pressure weakens Iranian's leadership structure. Targeted strikes eliminate key figures, infrastructure is degraded, internal instability begins to rise, which Israel's and US have been doing, but I think it's not successful. It's not shown any sign of success because most key Iranian leaderships are eliminated, but still it's pretty strong internally, and they're able to absorb all the losses, and they're retaliating very strongly. So, but it could be done. The objective would be to force either collapse of the current government or emergence of a new leadership more aligned with Western interests. However, this is far more complex than it appears. Iran's political system is deeply embedded within its military institution. You have to understand, when the leadership and military institutions are the same force, then the external threat can't just eliminate the leadership, because in order for them to eliminate the leadership, they have to eliminate the military. And that's why you have to understand why the West weaponized democracy. When you have democracy, it's very easy for them to isolate the leadership from military power. So leadership doesn't have the capability to defend itself and its nation, and the militaries are completely isolated from the leadership. So now the external force can easily negotiate with the leadership, and they can easily overthrow the leadership. That's what happened and everywhere. When those regimes do not serve the interest of the Western power, then they come and infiltrated the system. But when they're embedded, the leadership and military is embedded into one single system, it's very challenging, but it's still doable, which we have seen in Iraq, right? Because Saddam and others, Gaddafi, they're embedded. They were the dictators. They were the only leadership and military power in the state. But since they have the power to defend, the war was prolonged. So, Iran's political system is deeply embedded within its military institution, religious leadership, and national identity. This makes rapid regime change extremely difficult. Even if leadership collapses, power vacuum could emerge. Internal conflict could escalate. Regional stability could worsen. For the US, it's a high risk strategy. For Israel, it may seem strategically beneficial, but the long term consequences are unpredictable. In many ways, this scenario could create more instability than stability, but this could be achievable, and that could, I think it's still highly unlikely, but if it happens, would be the most smoothest conclusion of the war. Because then, if you have regime changes, the new regime will be more in line with U.S. and Israel interests, and therefore they could easily negotiate and find a common path to stabilize the region. This conflict is not just about territory or ideology. It's about power, economics, energy, and global influence. Understanding the role of oil, the dollar, and geopolitical alliances reveals a deeper reality. Modern wars are not only fought with weapons, but with currencies, resources, and strategic control of global systems. Because in today's interconnected world, a single conflict can reshape the future of the entire planet. Just how we have seen in World War One and World War Two, both wars have erupted and escalated very quickly, and then it overtook the rest of the world and created a massive chaos. So we conclude with the discussion that it's again the whole situation in the Middle East is very chaotic. It's very hard to comprehend what's going on, but I hope the explanation that we have provided made it easier for our audience to understand how the conflict have developed into the today's war and where it could lead. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, and we'll have more updates for you guys. Thanks for joining.